So if you're a photographer out there, if you're someone who's always thought about having a photo booth, or you want to make one for a party or something like that, I'm going to make one today. My idea is that I'm going to have a box that goes around this ring light. This camera will go through the middle of the ring light, and then there'll be legs. We'll have legs somehow. So the legs will make it tall enough. Oh, there also will be room for an iPad, because you have to have an iPad so that you can show what's going on. Check it out. First things first, we're going to measure, which I've already drawn out here, but I'm just gonna take my ring light. This is like a $100 ring light. What I like about this one is it's very thin. The profile is super thin, and so you can easily fit this into kind of a larger box without having a huge box. Our depth has to be basically as thick as this camera. So it's probably like 7 or 8 inches thick, which is nice. I don't want something that's gonna be too unstable, so I'll make it a little bit as much of a box as possible. It'll have an access door at the back, and that way you'll be able to control the camera and move out the iPad and do all that kind of stuff. So first things first, I'm gonna measure out my light. And what I'm doing is just tracing the inside here. Where it's gonna get complicated is we're gonna have the camera in here and also the iPad. The camera, the key thing is that I have enough space for the lens, because that's the thing that's gonna take the actual picture, and then that's going to send it to the iPad. So then I have to have a space for the iPad where I can cut that out and put that in here. So I have the markings for the ring light. Now I need to mark out the hole for the camera. So there we go, camera lens, ring light, iPad. So I've just marked the space for the iPad. One thing to think about with an iPad is you don't want the people who are using your photo booth to be able to touch your home button and get to all your other apps and change things or whatever you might have in that situation. I'm at a high school, so that would happen. The other thing you want to do is make it a little bit smaller so just the screen is shown. So even though I've marked the exterior, I'm going to cut it about 1 inch on each side because there's more bezel on that side, and then about 1/2 inch from the top. So I can mark those kind of roughly here, but the idea is that you're really only showing the screen. This is what it looks like. So now we just got to cut that out. Here I'm using a jigsaw to cut this out. I used to hate jigsaws, but it turned out the blade I was using just wasn't great, so I'll put a little link in the description for a blade that I like that cuts well. This is just 1/4 inch material, so it cuts like butter. It's so easy, and it's pretty quick to work through. You'll see a technique I did there that I like to use, which is just to drop the blade, turn it on, and you can actually cut through the material. You'll see it a couple more times if you missed it, but you just slowly drop it in and it'll cut it really nicely. Then just a quick trip over to the drum sander allows me to sand those edges nicely. So now that I have this piece cut out and it fits nicely in the interior, it doesn't fit perfectly, and that's okay, because I want a little tension from the front, because what I'm gonna do is use just some scrap ply, and the thickness is just about perfect that I can basically create a cleat system on the back that will then pinch it in so that it's nice and tight, but it's not overly fixed. I don't need it to be so tight that it's potentially damaging this. I just want it to be nice and tight in here. So now I need to cut out pieces that I'll effectively hot glue or CA glue into here to create a cleat system so this is nice and solid on the back. So I have the camera on, I have all of the supports, the backing stuff. I used CA glue. CA glue is great. I have some people comment sometimes that it will destroy your nostrils, and that's probably true. I don't use it very often, but for stuff like this, it really can't be beat where you need to put plywood on plywood and you want a really strong hold. Now what I need to do though is build basically a box frame that's gonna go around it, and that's what's gonna ultimately kind of create the box of the overall piece. So this will be kind of in two parts. One, I'm gonna build a frame that kind of clamps this in, and then another frame that attaches to those clamps, but then also touches on the back of this, and then a backer piece that will have an access door to the entire back of an access panel. So that's what I'm thinking of next. Here we go.
And if it's not obvious so far, I am clearly making this up as I go, and that's intentional. I want to show you that you can make this with your own skills and your own tools. I have obviously a lot of really great tools, but with just a jigsaw and some planning and some problem solving, you can really make this however you want to make it. And here, I just wanted to illustrate that you can do it as you go. You don't need a fancy plan or anything like that. As I'm showing here, there are little things that you have to work around, right? I needed some finger holds to make sure I could reach in and pull out that iPad. I also needed to work around the shape of the lens because I wanted that to be in there tight, but not overly tight, because I want to be able to have the camera on there and have it nice and secure, but still be able to take the picture. Now the next step really is just building the frame and building the box. And if I failed to explain this before, all of this is just 1/2 inch plywood and 1/4 inch plywood. And that way it creates a light box. This does not need to be super heavy. It does not need to be super bulky, but it does need to fit. And so here I used my miter saw just to cope out a little bit of a groove, because that 19 inch light was a little bit too big and it cut into that box. So as I go through here, I'm just gluing and tacking it together with a pin nail. I would really recommend you use screws to further support this as you go, but the pin nails and the glue are a really great way to get started. For the front, I had to figure out how to cut a really nice clean cover, and I realized that if I just took out the ring light diffuser, it is the perfect shape for the perimeter of the overall ring light. So I could then once again use the jigsaw to cut a circle and have a perfect cover for this. Now it stands a little bit proud of the light, and that's fine. It doesn't make any difference, and you could really dial that in to have no gap there, but again, it really doesn't affect the function of it. Once I've tacked that on, I love this part of woodworking. If you don't have a router, again, you could use your jigsaw to clean this up, but a router is really cool because you can just follow the edge and it basically becomes a pattern, and you can get a really clean, nice box after you've cut that off. Now, really the next to last step besides the legs is to make a door on the back. And the simplest way to do a door is, in this case, just grabbing my jigsaw and starting a cut and running it basically as an arch, but stopping halfway. And it's really important to stop halfway because it's going to save you from having to do more work than is necessary. Because once you stop, you can then add your hinges and screw those in, and you're going to have a door that's perfectly aligned. If you cut the whole thing out, the door would fall through, and then you'd have to figure out a way to brace it as you put on those hinges. So, little trick, just add those hinges as you go, and then finish your cut once those hinges are secured, and you'll have a nice functional door. And once you're done with that, of course, you're gonna need to sand it. I skipped a lot of sanding, and I cut my finger sanding. I don't know if I'm the only woodworker that has this, but sanding is like the one time where I get injured in woodworking, besides a couple other times. I added a little backer hinge for the door just so it would stop, because you don't want it to be swinging all over the place. And I'm gonna add a lock later. You'll see that in the kind of the last shot. After a little bit more sanding, you can see the inside here and the outside. And of course, this is before paint and all the pretty stuff.
Everything fits in there really nicely. Now I need some legs, so I'm gonna use some really nice straight Doug fir that I was given for the legs. I've been waiting for a project for those, and that will be perfect for this. I'm just gonna have a couple legs on both sides, slightly splayed out, so hopefully that is nice and balanced. When I tried it on just a tripod, which would have been a really convenient setup for this, it was too wobbly, and I don't want this thing wobbling because people are gonna be coming up and touching it, and I don't want it to suddenly fall over. So some splayed out legs should be a really nice fit to make this thing look nice and finish this project.
So to make the legs, I ripped down some wood, chopped it, and then just did a little round over to make it nice and pretty. And then you remember the thing I said about not having it tip or be unstable? Well, 3 legs, as I had it set up there, was very unstable, and it fell and kind of knocked me in the head there, and then everything fell apart. So I sat it down and had to do some soul searching and figure out what exactly to do next. What I landed on was just to do 4 legs and then to just have a brace that crossed in between, and that worked out just fine. And you can see how it works right here. So I realized this wasn't exactly a how-to, which was, step by step and exact measurements and all that stuff. But I think what it illustrates is that you can make one of these pretty easily with basic hobbyist skills and some basic tools, and it can serve you really well. This has worked really nicely with an iPad, with a camera, and with some basic woodworking skills. You can make a really nice photo booth.